Hello, welcome to our newest Time to Talk. We are here with Scott. Feel free to start when you're ready. Introduce yourself.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Scott. I'm going to be going over some of my experience defining sort of like what a technical artist is, digging into what the role entails, and I have a few pieces of portfolio advice towards the end of the presentation for anyone that's looking to get into tech art. I hope you enjoy this presentation. First things first, we're just going to talk a little bit about my experience as a technical artist. So I started working at a company called Mediatonic back in 2016, almost like a lifetime ago now it feels. Mostly focused on UI implementation and general tooling. So a lot of my work revolved around implementing UI for mobile games. And alongside that, I developed Photoshop tools that will help me implement all of the UI for the games. And in addition to that, because we were targeting mobile devices from early as 2012, which is crazy now that I think about it. A lot of my time was spent on optimization, and then towards the sort of like latter years or later years at Mediatonic, I focused more on the procedural aspect of technical art. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Eventually, Mediatonic was acquired by Epic Games. So I ended up working at Epic for a little while. And that's when my focus really shifted onto pipeline and tooling, working with procedural assets, getting levels put up very quickly as our projects expanded and gotten bigger and bigger. I also delved into technical animation, so looking at rigging, looking at creating custom animation states for vertex animation stuff, which involved a lot of shader work alongside that as well. After Epic Games, I then moved on over to a company called Rebellion, who make the Sniper Elite games. And I've just shown off their latest game called Atomfall. At Rebellion, what I mostly worked on there was Python tooling and procedural work. Procedural in the sense of using Houdini to create assets for their in-house engine, and then Python tooling to generate a bunch of pipelines for generating sort of stuff like icons or resizing textures, that kind of thing. Then after about a year and a half at Rebellion, now I work at a company called Alpha Channel. Most of my work is done in Engine for them, working on tools, visual systems such as weather and simulation work. We have a vehicle game in development at the moment, so working on how vehicles wade through water, for example. That kind of stuff is what I'm working on. We are leading up to optimization, mostly focused on consoles at the moment. So I've gone through each one of these companies, and I've done a wide range of different technical art roles throughout each company. But these are just snippets of what I've done. My resume contains so much more information on individual tasks and stuff that I've done as a technical artist. So there's a lot to being a technical artist. There's a lot of different areas you can delve into. So let's just talk a little bit about the definition of a technical artist. The general kind of like consensus is a technical artist is the bridge between an artist and a programmer. But kind of like what they don't tell you is that it's a very wide bridge. There's a lot of different avenues you can go down as a technical artist. There's a lot of different areas. Tech art is such a generalized term. It's becoming more and more common to find specific technical artist titles or roles, such as a pipeline technical artist, where you're working with a lot of tooling, or a UI technical artist, where you're focused mostly on UI implementation. And sort of alongside that, you'll find more specific roles in job postings, such as a UI technical artist, like I just said, a technical animator, which is a part of tech art, a shader specific technical artist, and a procedural technical artist. So all of these different roles, these roles specifically, you can have massive in-depth knowledge of each individual one. So much so that they can actually be individual jobs and not necessarily classed as tech art, but they still fall under that umbrella of technical artist. And what you end up seeing is technical artists focusing on one of these particular things. If we look at a technical artist specialization now, so when it comes to technical artists, you often find that they do focus on specific areas. My focus tends to be pipelines and procedural work. So again, working with pipelines, generating the tools for these pipelines, and then also additionally making these procedural assets for video games, allowing someone to just take a procedural asset, place it in a level, and they can adjust the parameters as needed. I really enjoy this side of work. I think it's really fulfilling because at the end of the day, I'm helping speed up someone else's process, and seeing them smile at the end of the day, it's just nice, But that's me. On the other side, we have someone like JJ, and I think she's in the chat right now. Hi, JJ. Their focus is on UI specifically and materials as well. Here we have two separate people who, whilst they have the title technical artist, we do completely separate things. It's not expected of JJ to develop an entire pipeline, a Python pipeline, or whatever the case may be. In the same vein, it's not expected for me to go ahead and implement a bunch of UI for our game. And that's sort of the issue when it comes around defining tech art, because each project, each company, and even individually each team has a different purpose for tech art. And if we move on to just like a team structure presentation, this is a team which I had worked in. It was a very strong team. We had a lead who focused on supporting and managing the tech art team. And we had an individual for each of these areas of tech art, procedural, tech animation, rendering, and tooling. Now, this was a strong team, not only because they had their individual specializations, but we each had a foundation knowledge of technical art. Basically just a foundation of shared skills. So if one of us was taken from the project, we could take on that other person's work and share it among ourselves. And sure, we couldn't get up and start running with the work that they were doing immediately, but we had the necessary foundation just to jump into that role that they had left and pick up the pieces and just start, maybe not running, but just walking with the role and getting up to speed with it. And I think that's a very strong, I think that makes a very strong technical artist, is the fact that you have all of these sort of foundational skills, whether it's Python, whether it's just like a mixture or very shallow knowledge of Python, Unreal, Unity, C++, whatever, but then you can then use those foundation knowledge skills to jump into sort of any role that may be missing within your project. And I think that's what makes a technical artist very strong, very adaptable, and that's great. But when we talk about specializations, what kind of work does someone who specializes in a specific area do? So I'm just going to go through a couple of examples of what specific technical artists would go through on maybe not a day-to-day basis, but just the overall sort of tasks that they do. So I'm going to start with a UI technical artist. Like I said before, the UI technical artist's main job is implementing the UI. However, I'm aware it's becoming more and more standard in the industry that the UI artists themselves do the implementation work. So for a few places, the role has become more supportive in that sense. They end up optimizing assets such as 9 slicing, combining all textures into an atlas, that kind of thing. They develop tools for speeding up implementation work. So, for example, on the right here is a tool I made a long time ago for Photoshop, which allows an artist to quickly 9 slice. If you know what a 9 slice is, that's great. If you don't, it's just basically cutting up a texture and having it stretch in Engine. So rather than having a massive texture that's displayed across your screen, you've got a really small texture that's just being stretched. Great memory saving technique. But this tool I made a while ago supports the artists in quickly making a 9 sliced asset for them to use, rather than manually doing it all the time. Additionally, technical artists or UI technical artists create UI materials around animation, special effects. This is stuff not expected of a UI artist to do because it's a little bit too technical, too much math for them to learn in addition to all of the UI stuff that they do. So a UI technical artist would create these animations in the materials or the shaders for the UI, make them look really nice and perform really well. So that's a UI technical artist. I'm going to move on to a procedural technical artist. A procedural technical artist focuses on how to make procedural assets for artists and designers. They create these assets which can be changed via the properties that they've created. So, for example, here I have a table which can change shape, size, the material of the table as well, and the sort of waviness of the cloth. This allows an artist or designer to change the mesh depending on the current need. So, for example, whether it needs to be a long sort of medieval diner table or dinner table, it could be that, or they could use the circular table for some sort of outside garden party kind of feature. They just need to edit the properties for it. It's just one asset they throw in and change the properties, and they have something new. This saves a lot of time for the artist because the artist doesn't have to go back and forth remodeling, different variants of the table. And the great thing about these sort of procedural systems is that they're scalable. So if you wanted to have a more complex system, which involved, well, let's use the table as an example here. If we wanted to create a more complex system which had furnishings, maybe you could add some chairs to the table. Maybe you can add in the plates or have different types of food on the table. Creating these bigger complex systems is really great and easy to do when you're going down a procedural route. And you don't have to have the artist manually place down plates, place down chairs. You can do it procedurally with a click of a button, changing some parameters, and you get something new. And this is really great for time saving, and the artist doesn't have to do a lot of going back and forth remodeling stuff. The TA may also create the procedural tools to apply to meshes. This is sort of like a different way of thinking of procedural work. Rather than having an individual asset, you have a tool that you make. So, for example, you may create a procedural tool that only bevels certain edges on a mesh for whatever reason. And that tool can be run in Maya. And then the mesh that you have selected within Maya will end up having some beveled edges. Rather than having to write a Maya Python script, you run this tool, Houdini tool, and it does it for you. And then if something needs to change with the tool, they can just go back into Houdini or whatever they're using and change some nodes around, bring it back, and the artists can use it, right? I think it's quicker than writing a Python tool, and it allows a lot more variation in what the tool can do. It's also just a nice, quick way to share a tool for the artists. They don't have to learn how to use Houdini, which is great. And yeah, you don't have to write a bunch of Maya specific Python code, which I think is always a plus. If you've ever written Maya Python code, it's not the best, but I try to avoid it when possible myself. So that's a procedural technical artist. Again, just making a lot of procedural assets, making stuff faster is always great. And we're going to move on to pipeline and a tool technical artist. The job of a pipeline technical artist is to automate processes to speed up workflows, just like the procedural way of doing stuff. But this role is more on the technical side of things. Communication is very important for this job, as you work with a variety of artists. They could be concept artists, they could be 3D artists, they could be UI artists. Your job is to facilitate the needs of the artists within your team and figure out how you can speed up their workflows without impacting their artistic creativeness. The tools you make are made using Python, but also using C# or C++, depending on the sort of like engine that you're doing. An example pipeline that I did was this Python tool. It took an FBX, ran it through Blender to generate different mesh property maps, such as normals, AO, roughness, those kinds of things. And then we ran each of those textures through a Substance Designer file, and it generated a single image icon for that mesh for us to use in the game's inventory. With the amount of meshes that we had to go through and them constantly changing throughout development, we actually ended up having this ran automatically overnight. And so by the end, the artist only had to save an FBX to a specific folder, and it will create the icon for us. It saved a lot of time, a lot of tedious work for the artist setting up and going through Blender and then Substance Designer themselves. It was great for them. In addition to that, like I said, this is a coding heavy role, and you need that artistic knowledge to understand what the artists need, but you also need technical prowess, as you'll be managing your tools throughout development as well. There is always upkeep costs when making tools. You've got to update them for whatever reason, you've got to fix bugs, that kind of thing. On the right here, on the bottom right, is a tool called the Technical Art Toolbox, which I made at Rebellion. It helps with the distribution and updates of tools for artists. So they only need to click one button to install a tool. This sort of came about because I noticed early on that there was a massive issue when it came to distributing tools at the company. And there ended up being a lot of different versions of the same tools on different people's machines, which is not great, right? You don't know who's got what, and you don't know if the version that they have is the latest or not. But also, one of the major issues I found was that they didn't know the tools existed. That's a big thing, right? That's a big issue, because as a tool technical artist, you're supposed to talk to everyone. You're supposed to communicate. These tools are available to you. You can have these tools if you need them. And that's sort of like this problem solving, this sort of looking at issues, trying to figure out a solution, or even just noticing the issues and making note of them is very important as a technical artist, because in my opinion, technical artists are less of a bridge between artist and programmer than they are artistic and creative problem solvers. We're always trying to figure out how to do something efficiently whilst making it the best looking that we can do. If we make something that's efficient, but the artist comes over and is like, no, that doesn't look great, that's awful, why have you done this? Then you've not achieved your job as a technical artist. You need to ensure that what you're doing is, whilst efficient, it looks great. It should look great. With that being On days, sometimes we're not like this. Sometimes this is my favorite comment because I always post this when something goes wrong at work. Oh god, try pressing more buttons kind of thing. With that being said, TechAt is a fun, challenging career option for a bunch of people. It involves a lot of conversations, lots of problem solving, and almost never enough coffee. If you are following along and are thinking that TechAt sounds great, which it is, in my opinion, or if you know you want to become a technical artist in the future, but maybe struggling to get opportunities, I'm going to talk a little bit now about some portfolio advice for you guys. We move on here. So I've been in the industry now for just under, I think, 8 years. And I've interviewed quite a few people over that course of time, and sort of compiled a bunch of tips for portfolios. And whilst this is focused on TechAt, I think some of it can be taken for, I think some of it could be for a programmer or an artist. So if you are one of those, maybe just take some notes if you want to. So the first thing, TechAt is more than modeling. I think I've gone over this enough in this presentation, but TechAt has a lot of different areas to go into. I've seen far too many TechAt portfolios, which just show models. Now, it's great to see that you know how to model and draw, but that's not what we're hiring you for. At most, we're going to be editing meshes rather than creating them. Editing them in the sense that you change the UVs to support some sort of shader, or optimizing the asset by removing some vertices or polygons when they're not needed. Those are the kinds of things when it comes to modeling that we do. One of the sort of like great sort of things that we like to see is to take it a step further. So if you do have models in your portfolio, it's really great to see the extra steps when it comes to making material animations or scrolling textures, or doing some vertex offsets. Getting those into your portfolio is really great to see, especially as a junior TA. One of the junior TAs I've interviewed in the past, a guy called Zach, he had a very strong portfolio piece where a lot of this piece is just modeling a gun from Ratchet and Clank. And he went through his modeling process, which is fine, but then he took it a step further. He brought that gun into Unreal and started messing around with materials, showing the different steps that he's done on these materials, and developing the final look of the gun in engine with a custom material and all that stuff. That's great to see. That's what we want to see from a technical artist. We don't want to see just models. It just adds that extra layer of detail that shows that you actually do have some technical knowledge when it comes to modeling or material shader work. That's really great to see. The next piece of advice I have, and this sort of extends to 3D artists, I will admit, when you put the term game ready in your portfolio, it'll be more scrutinized. As soon as you say your model or asset is game ready, we will question as to whether what makes it game ready or not. And I've done this in interviews. I've scrutinized the hell out of assets that have game ready. So of my other interviewers who have done it. If it is game ready, you need to show that it's game ready. And to do that, you need to show it in a game engine, right? Too many times I've seen something be titled game ready and it's a render shot in Maya. Don't really care about that, I'll be honest. You need to take that extra step and get a scene set up in engine, in a game engine of your choice. It doesn't have to be Unreal or Unity or Godot. It can be anything any game engine that you're comfortable using, and just put your model, even I've seen even people with Houdini assets not put them in engine. That's not great. Put them in a scene, add some lights to the scene if you want to, but get it in engine with a material that's ready to go. Then it's game ready, because it shows us that you've gone through that process of, cool, you've made a model, it looks good in Maya, but doing the extra steps process of importing that model, making sure that model looks correct in the engine, is a massive leap that a lot of especially beginner artists don't do. And again, this extends to technical artists as well, because I have seen people use Houdini and sometimes actually even Blender nodes, procedural Blender nodes, and they keep the work inside of Blender or Unreal. Sorry, not Unreal, inside Houdini. And so that's great to see. It shows us that you know that procedural work, you know the flow, but you really need to bring it in engine. Otherwise, you're going to get scrutinized by the interviewers. It's not going to be fun for everyone. You really need to get them in engine. Yeah. LLMs are a tool. So I'm going to talk about language models here, not generative art models, because I know that's kind of a hot topic at the moment. So first off, so this is primarily for programmers. If you're an artist, don't worry about this. But first off, we're going to talk about how it's a tool, not a replacement. Using something like ChatGPT as a step in your workflow is absolutely fine if you want to do it. However, I've seen quite a few portfolios which look like this image here of code. It's not great. It's not great code. The variables are not named correctly. It's obviously copy-pasted. There's no rewritten stuff. And it's also not necessary because it's just adding two things together. You need to rewrite and understand the code that the model gives you. It's not 100% accurate, and the closer you get to niche areas of coding, for example, I've used ChatGPT to look at PyQt stuff, extremely specific PyQt, I think OpenGL stuff, and ChatGPT was useless for me. It wasn't telling me the stuff that I needed. So the more niche of an area you go into with coding, the less accurate it's going to be. And effectively, you need to treat the code that ChatGPT gives you as a enhanced Stack Overflow, meaning look at the code, read it, understand what it's trying to say, or understand what it's trying to give you, and then implement it yourself. Don't just copy and paste. Sort of use ChatGPT to look up functions, syntax, understand what functions do, and maybe even like I've used ChatGPT before to paste code in and have it sort of rewrite the code that I've written to make it more readable. I find that's an often use case I do. But you shouldn't be fully reliant upon LLMs to write your code for you. If you just copy paste the code, it shows that not only don't you fully understand what you are doing, as the interviewer, it shows a complete lack of proofreading your code and incompetence that you think you can get away with just copying it. It's a major red flag for us. And I've said no to interviewees who have otherwise had great portfolios just because they've had an entire sort of Python script, which was obviously copy pasted from ChatGPT, and it was full of these kind of foobar functions and code. Not great to see. You really need to understand the code that you are writing here. With that being said, we'll move on to presenting your code. Presenting your code can be difficult for anyone. My often advice is to document the flow of your code with a diagram. It could be a flow chart, could be a flow chart. But it elevates your portfolio to show off your code. In my example here of my UI9 Slicer plugin, I have a repo link in the description of my piece. That's fine, that's good. You don't need anything else more than that. It links to my GitHub repo, which has all the code inside, as well as a document which explains what's going on. But it's very much wanted. Like, a lot of people, especially juniors, don't show their code. They could be scared about doing it, but you really need to show as a technical artist, because technical art does have a lot of coding, set up a lot of technical necessity for you to know. So us being able, as an interviewer, to be able to see that elevates it, because we won't be then in the interview asking you how you did stuff and then you showing us on a video call, you sharing your screen. It's not a great experience for us. It's a lot easier for us to navigate your code if you just share it online. And when you share it online, you should use platforms such as GitHub, GitLab, something similar. It's sort of the basic kind of thing for programmers, and it should be for the tech art as well. You should have a GitHub account or something similar where we can easily view your code. I know that a lot of people like make their own website for their portfolios. In my opinion, it's not necessary. The website contributes nothing to your skill set and as a technical artist. And so only make a website if you really want to or need to. Otherwise, publish on ArtStation, publish on Google Drive, and just make sure your code make sure your code is easily accessible. And if you can, make use of Markdown. Markdown is the standard way of documenting code. It enriches your code with stuff like links, drop downs, tables. It's really easy to use. There's a bunch of VS Code extensions that you can use to write Markdown. It's really great, and because it's the standard, a lot of people can easily read it because we're used to it, especially in the workplace. A lot of companies just use Markdown by default whenever they're documenting stuff. So if you can, make use of Markdown, publish it on GitHub, make sure that your code is easily accessible just by putting a link in the description of your portfolio piece. That's all you need for that. Next piece of advice: courses are welcome, additions are king. There are a lot of courses online, a lot. In the form of Udemy, even on YouTube, Skillshare, etc. These are great tools to improve your skills and knowledge. However, you need to go beyond what the course teaches you. Whilst at the end of the course, you will have something presentable on your portfolio, so will other thousands of students. Even in this case, over 1 million students will have the same sort of portfolio pieces that you will have. So take some time after you've finished the course to reflect on what you did, what you've learned, and add to it. Add to whatever it is you're making. If it's a Python tool, add some additional functionality. If it's a shader, apply the shader to a mesh and make some adjustments to it to make it even better. Add something that shows that you learned from the course. It adds a lot to your portfolio if you can do that. And make sure you express that too. Say in your portfolio that you followed the course up until a certain point, and then after that, you took it down your own route, you made it your own. If you show that, if you do that, that's great. Because even in the workplace, I, for example, look at references all the time. Everyone does. It's impossible to know everything. And so I could watch a YouTube tutorial on how to make a specific shader. And then after it's finished, I've learned from it, and then I take it and do my own thing. That's perfectly fine to do. It's perfectly fine to do it on your portfolio as well. It's even good that you've done that, because it means that it means that you're just not following the instructions vertebrim, and that you're actually making it your own. That's great. That's awesome. Seek feedback past your teachers. I believe this is the last piece of advice I have for you guys. So getting feedback from professionals in the industry is a key asset to have in developing yourself. They offer more up-to-date advice on what the industry entails, but also there's no bias like a teacher would have. They would be straightforward and honest with you in telling you what's good, what's bad about your portfolio, and they'll give you honest criticism and honest advice about it. They offer a different perspective, like I just said, from the teacher. And, you know, one of the things why we're here is, you know, the Game Collective. You know, we have mentor program. I personally am currently mentoring two technical artists. They're doing a great job. I hope I'm doing a great job. Who knows? But there are a lot of different mentors on the Game Collective Discord that you can reach out to and get experience from them. And, you know, even if there isn't anyone on there for your specific role that you want, reach out anyway. You know, maybe talk to someone, maybe post a message on LinkedIn, in the Discord, wherever, and see if anyone is willing to help you out. Even on Twitter. What I find is people on Twitter, or X now, are very helpful with helping you. Everyone in the gaming industry is willing to help each other, and it's a great community to be in. In addition to that, making connections. Making connections is always great. I've been to, the IGDA is the International Game Developers Association. If you're not aware of it, they host a lot of meetup events across the world. If you can attend one, I recommend you do. I attended one on Thursday this week, and it was great. I made a few new LinkedIn connections out of it, as well as met a few people who have been in the industry way longer than I have, and getting their insights into sort of the issues I'm having is invaluable, right? It's really great. I highly recommend you go to these meetups and you make connections, you show off your portfolio and get that feedback from people, from industry professionals. It's really helpful. It's really great. And like I said, the industry is very social. In order to thrive in the industry, you have to make connections. You have to talk to people. It's not useful just to not do that. Yeah, that's that. And so Tech Art, I love this picture. This is from Riot Games. They've done a video on Tech Art as well. If you want to watch that, I highly recommend. They give a great explanation on Tech Art within Riot. So Tech Art is an area of development, of game development, focused on enriching the art of the game by helping artists and designers achieve beyond what they already do. Problem solving, like I said. That's in the form of tooling, procedural, shaders, rigging, simulations, and more. There's a lot of different areas of Tech Art you can go into. This is just the intro for Tech Art, so I'm obviously not going to go over everything. I've gone into a few today, but it's such a big area. There's a lot of different things you can explore within Tech Art. I think that's great. I think that's a wonderful thing. It makes it such a great career path because you can explore. You can figure out what you really like and delve into that. But at the end of the day, you know, there's a lot of areas, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's really only sort of like one thing that connects all technical artists. And that fundamentally is that we really have no idea what we're doing. We have absolutely no idea. It's great. It's awesome. And that's it. That's everything I've got for you guys. I think we're going to go over to Q&A now. Here's my link tree if anyone wants to not click on that, but look at that and get my socials. And yeah, if you have any questions, please throw them into the chat and we'll talk about them. Thank you for coming.
Cool. That was great. That was awesome. Thank you, Scott. So yeah, if anyone has questions, now's your time.
So I guess first off, Kai, you mentioned about does game ready meaning just imported to a game engine? Yes and no. Doing that is great, just bringing it in, but actually applying materials and getting it looking good in engine is what we're looking for. That's what we really mean when we say game ready. It's ready to go in, it's ready to be used by the project however it needs to be done, however it needs to be, rather than just having it in Maya looking good. That's not helpful to the game. It's just helpful to your portfolio or asset individually. Anthony, how did you find the specialization you liked the most? Did it take a lot of exploration in each area? It did. It kind of didn't for me because I hit pipelines earlier on in my career. And I enjoy just making tools for the artists as well as myself. I think the biggest thing was making the tools for myself to speed up my workflow was great. I really loved doing that because it saved me a lot of tedious work. And so I've just been invested in that since. I know that some technical artists go into specializations without realizing it. So I know one guy who just focuses on Python. That's all he does. It's just Python, and he loves it a lot. And I think that was more of a slow kind of burner kind of thing where that was his job for a while, and he just never left. He didn't realize that was his specialization. Okay, JJ, what's the most challenging aspects of the job to you? Oh God, balancing the needs between the art director and whoever else is the stakeholder. You have to learn to say no in this job if necessary, but you're always trying to find a balance between what can be done and what can't be done, and convincing people that stuff can't be done. Like it's difficult to convince people sometimes, but you have to stick with your gut and be like, hey, this isn't going to be doable, and hopefully have proof of that. How do you draw the line? JJ also asked, how do you draw the line between what's your realm and the programmer's realm? The way I see it, programmers focus mostly on gameplay, and they set up the systems for us to work in. So if it's anything visual, it's the technical artist's job, really. There is some back and forth. Programmers will do some placeholder stuff, but ultimately, I think from a visual perspective, if it's something visual, it's technical artist's realm. YG or YJ has two questions. What is your opinion on the purpose of UI and UX, and can tech art be involved in 2D art as well as other than textures such as pixel art? Thanks. I think that's a very good question. The purpose of UI and UX in tech art can be two different things. So I don't know if JJ can speak more to this as a UI technical artist, but when you're making tools for artists, UI and UX is very important for that, because you want the artists to understand how your tool works. But also, if you look at the other direction, if you're talking about UI technical art, then sort of the purpose of tech art within UI and UX is all about speeding up your workflow and getting the UI implemented. That is where their purpose is within UI, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. It's all about making the UI look good and implementing it in the right way and making it optimized. And that's generally just what tech art is about. And can tech art be involved in 2D art? Yes. I know I've worked in 2D games before where we've rigged 2D characters in Unity with the 2D rigging plugin. I can't remember what it's called. But yes, tech art can be involved in 2D as well. When it comes to pipelines, having some automation process for sprite sheets, for example, and cutting them up saves a ton of time and saves a lot of human error happening with the artists. Doing that kind of stuff with tech art, yeah, definitely, it can be involved in 2D. Any other questions? Yep. Kai has another question. What is the general purpose on learning, building tools, automating things for yourself? I'm aware you'd have to try things out, but I do have trouble on how to find information, where to apply it, and the basic logic. Thank you. The general process really is figuring out what is it that you're trying to solve. Are you spending too much time editing a picture? Are you spending too much time baking out textures or something like that? So the initial step towards that is figuring out what is your problem that you're trying to solve, and then researching into any potential solutions. And then if there's already a solution out there that you can use, I recommend that you do that, because that's likely already been tried and tested and works, and you spend less time making something that's already been done. But if you find nothing and nothing fits your situation or problem, then it comes down to researching your platform that you're working in. If it's a problem in Blender, if it's something you're doing in Houdini or Unreal, you look into you look into the different areas within those platforms, within those software, and sort of look at what's available to you in terms of tooling and extending whatever software platform you're working in. And you start breaking down the problem step by step. And you go and you figure out each step individually. So step 1, you can solve with writing a couple of lines of code. Step 2, more lines. Step 3, yada, yada. And you continue until you get a final solution out of it. But it's all about breaking down your problem step by step and figuring out each separate part that you need to focus on. Learning tooling and learning how to make stuff is just going to come down to you watching courses or videos on YouTube on how to program in specific software. It's never going to tell you how to fix your exact problem. So that's where the whole problem solving situation and knowing how to break down a problem and solve it in individual steps really comes in handy. That's what you really need to learn. Andrew, is there any area you would consider TA as not being able to go? Ooh, not being able to go. It's really difficult because tech art dabbles in a lot of different areas. I mean, even in gameplay, probably networking a little bit. So server-side networking. But even then, I've done some of that in my job because I've had to set up server jobs for automation purposes. But I think when it comes to networking games, that's pretty much an area where tech art doesn't get involved. That's way too much code, I think, for anyone in tech art. Unless you're more on the programming side, then maybe. But I think networking is probably an area you don't want to go into. Serena asks, have you ever been stuck on a problem during a sprint? How did you handle the stress, or what happened after? Many times, Serena, so many times I've been stuck on a problem. The key thing is to communicate that with your lead and your producer and be like, hey guys, like this is taking me longer than I expected. I'm having some issue. Maybe your lead has some advice or knows how to do it. But ultimately, as long as your producer knows, you can account for the time loss. That's their job. The producer's job is to help you get your work done in some amount of time. And if you're telling them that it can't be done, then you work with your producer on figuring out what's the extended timeline, how's this gonna affect the project. That's their job, right? Handling the stress or what happened after is something I think that's more on an individual basis. I go by acceptance and be like, okay, sorry guys, I messed up here. It took longer than expected. It won't happen again, or be like, it happened because of this reason. And as long as I think for me, as long as I accept it, everyone else will, and you move on from that, and it just becomes a learning experience. It is very stressful. I've been there many times. It's very stressful. The best thing to do is just to reach out to your colleagues and say, hey, I'm having trouble with this. Can you help me? There's no problem in saying, I don't know. There's never any problem in doing that. YJ has another question. What platforms/tools do you use for structuring/organizing your portfolio? And how do you generally network? When it comes to my portfolio, I just use ArtStation. I post stuff up there. It's not the best portfolio. I think it's awful, but it is what it is. But I just post stuff up on there. I post pictures, diagrams of the flow, that kind of thing. Short description. And then if there's any code involved, if I'm able to show it, I link it in the description to my GitHub repo. That's generally what I do. When it comes to editing, I use Photoshop. Maybe if I need to record anything, it's OBS. And that's generally what I do. And then just on my personal computer, I just have a folder set up for my portfolio with each individual project or individual portfolio piece with images and text inside of each folder. That's generally what I do. Yeah. I think that's it for questions, unless anyone has anything else they want to talk about. If not, I think we can end it here, Anthony. There's several people typing, oh God. Just waiting for see what people type. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type it away. We've got like 9 minutes left, I think. I am probably going to also hang out in the co-working voice chat if anyone wants to have a talk about the presentation or anything else with tech art. Kai's got a last question. How would you know if they are not good with tech art? Sorry, how would you know if you are not good with tech art? Sometimes I worry I am not built for this. Yeah, understandable. Tech art, like I said, has a variety of skills that are not necessarily needed, which is an important thing here, but are good to know of. But the thing is like there's a lot to learn with tech art, but you don't have to learn everything. That's the important thing. I worked with a principal technical artist who only knows Houdini, doesn't know Python, doesn't know Unreal, doesn't know Unity or anything else, or C++ or whatever. He just uses Houdini, but he's really good at it, right? So that's important to understand, is that you don't have to learn everything. You focus on the small parts. One of the sort of like advice I give to my mentees actually is you pick a few subjects, right? And you go with them. So whether it's Python tooling, whether it's Houdini and shaders, you pick those three. Those are basically the three basic tech art roles or skills that you need to get into tech art. You run with those three. Don't worry about anything else. Everything else will come as you go through and develop your skills naturally. But those three are the key parts of tech art, and you need to just make something in those. So don't worry about everything. Focus on the small parts. Focus on just small individual tasks. And then over time, you'll eventually grow and grow your skills to fit everything within tech art. So don't worry about it. And if you're talking about imposter syndrome, everyone has it. I have it. I had it last week. It's awful. But just know that everyone's in the same boat as you and has different experiences. So some people are going to be naturally more knowledgeable than you just because they've had more years of experience. It's not something to worry about. The best thing you can do is just make stuff and show that you're better than what you think you are. I hope that's a good answer. I think it's a good answer.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Scott, for your presentation and for all of your knowledge. I feel like my brain is bigger now.
Thank you. I'm going to be hanging out in co-working again if anyone wants to have a chat. I'm going to be sticking around for like another half hour. And yeah, thank you all for coming. I hope it's been helpful for everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.